on Network Africa. DR Congo's President Felix Tshisekedi calls for the creation of vigilante groups to combat attacks in the country. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres hails the signing of cessation of hostilities in Ethiopia as hopeful news. Plus, Africa to be the biggest priority at the G7 summit as Kenyan and Ghanaian foreign ministers meet their counterparts in Germany. Hello and welcome to the program today. I'm Layo Olarinde. We begin in Central Africa, where the DRC's President Felix Tshisekedi has instructed the army chief to establish recruitment centers across the country. This is in response to what he calls Rwandan aggression, a reference to claims that Kigali is militarily supporting the M23 rebel movement in DR Congo's eastern Nord Kivu province. The president made the remarks in a national address, responding to the appeal by Congolese youth who have expressed their desire to protect the country against threats. However, he urges the youths to organize themselves into vigilance groups to support the army. According to President Tshisekedi, diplomatic efforts to ease the tensions with Rwanda have failed. Into the halted conflict in Ethiopia, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed has addressed Tigrayans after the government and regional forces from Tigray agreed to stop fighting on the peace talks led by the African Union. He was speaking at a gathering outside the country's capital, Addis Ababa, pleading with Tigrayans to stick to the peace agreement.
The Ethiopian government and Tigrayan forces agreed to cease hostilities, putting a halt to a 2-year war that has killed thousands, displaced millions, and left hundreds of thousands facing famine. Addressing Tigrayans outside of Addis Ababa, Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed acknowledges the cost of the destruction.
A lot of an undeserved price has been paid. A lot of blood has been spilled, property destroyed. A lot of media that do know or don't know Ethiopia before have been tarnishing our image, belittled her. Enough.
The Prime Minister hereby pleads with the people of Tigray to stick to the peace agreement.
Very often, after a peace deal, tricks and mischievous maneuvers are common. I implore you, the respected people of Tigray, our Tigrayan brothers and sisters, with the utmost sincerity, to play your role and duty of Ethiopian citizenship, along with your other brothers and sisters. Since we are ready to honor our commitments, I urge you to end here the trickery and mischievous activities of a very few.
Delegates from both sides signed the agreement in South Africa just over a week after formal peace talks began.
In the meantime, the scars of the bloody 2-year conflict between the Ethiopian government and Tigrayan forces are still fresh and run deep despite the ceasefire agreement. For Andom Ghebreyesus, an exiled Tigrayan, he says he is skeptical that this peace will last, adding that the cessation of hostilities may bring relief, but is unlikely to offer lasting peace. He managed to escape to Kenya with his children, but like many, says he has not heard from the rest of his family in more than a year.
It's not a nice place. We were not hoping to see another war, but you know, this thing came again and we lost everything, just literally everything. So I feel sad about that. At this time of the year, at this century, we would have been solving our problems peacefully, but the war came and we lost many people, and I feel sad about that. I left the Tigray with my kids. The rest, they are there. I don't know what happened to them. It has been 2 years. I haven't heard anything from them. They live around the border with Eritrea, and it's at the most unreachable place. No communications, no power, no banking system. I don't know even if they are alive. I don't know. And this is where they live.
Regional and world leaders have hailed this peace agreement between Ethiopia's government and Tigray rebels, raising hopes for an end to 2 years of brutal conflict marked by atrocities, including killings, gang rapes and starvation. For the United Nations Secretary-General Antonio Guterres, he is pleased with the deal and hails the signing of cessation of hostilities by both parties as hopeful news.
In action and the value of discreet but determined. From the Black Sea Initiative and the Ethiopian agreement, we can see that they are demonstrations of the power of multilateralism in action and the value of discreet but determined diplomacy. And that means our planet is on course for reaching tipping points and that will make climate chaos irreversible and forever bake in catastrophic temperature rise. We need to move from tipping points to turning points for hope. And that means urgently increasing ambition and trust, especially between North and South. Specifically, it's time for an historic pact between the developed and the emerging economies.
Meanwhile, the U.S. State Department says the Ethiopia agreement represents an important step for peace. According to the U.S. State Department spokesperson Ned Price, Washington will continue to engage and to advance the peace agreement.
Today we had an announcement. What we will have to see is follow-through. And the United States will be there. We will be there to continue working with the African Union. They will continue to lead this process. But we will continue to engage directly with the African Union, to engage with those in the region who are facilitating this dialogue, and to continue engaging with the parties themselves. These discussions have provided an opportunity for a number of things. In the first instance, they provided an opportunity which we hope to see realized of a cessation of hostilities. We've invested so heavily in this process because we believe it's the most opportune and effective mechanism through which to achieve a cessation of hostilities, to help enable the delivery of much-needed humanitarian assistance to the people of northern Ethiopia, to the people of Tigray. We hope and expect that will follow from today's announcement.
Discussed do the United States think that the existing...
Over to Kenya, where union officials have announced that pilots at the country's national airline, Kenya Airways, will begin strike on Saturday. The action comes days after the expiry of a 2-week strike notice issued by the pilots' union, who are demanding that the airline resume contributions to their retirement fund. The Kenya Airline Pilots Association, KALPA, says their members will not report for duty at the Jomo Kenyatta International Airport in Nairobi from Saturday, 6 a.m. local time. Well, this is the largest airport in the country and the 4th busiest in Africa. The union's 14-day strike notice expired on Wednesday, but operations at the airline remained uninterrupted on Thursday. Well, foreign ministers from Kenya and Ghana have met with their G7 counterparts in Germany as the summit is set to discuss food shortages in Africa during a conference in the city of Münster. The 2-day meeting is also expected to focus on Russia's war against Ukraine and its global impact. British Foreign Minister James Cleverly says they will be discussing the impact on global hunger on the global south. The UN estimates that 2/3 of South Sudan's population, that's up to 7.8 million people, may face severe food shortages between April and July 2023, and that's as a result of floods, drought and conflict. Also, the High Representative of the European Union for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy, Josep Borrell, says Africa remains the biggest priority at the summit.
It's a very important time for the G7 foreign ministers to be meeting. We have discussed, of course, the situation in Ukraine and Russia's illegal, unprovoked invasion, and why we now, as the G7, need to ensure we remain committed to the support of the Ukrainians as they defend themselves against this Russian aggression. But we must also recognise the impact that Russia's actions are having elsewhere in the world. Today we will be joined by our good friends from the EU, from the Africa Union, and we will be discussing the impact on global hunger, on the global south.
Africa remains our priority, our biggest priority. And we will have our African friends participating in this meeting. There is a good news coming from Africa, from the Horn of Africa, where a ceasefire and a cessation of hostilities in Ethiopia is putting an end to the fight. And I have to remember the tens of thousands of people who have been killed in this awful war, where the most awful abuses has been happening during the last 2 years.
Women in South Sudan are now being represented in decision-making positions across the country, and that's thanks to the 2018 Peace Pact deal and a recent two-day sensitization workshop organized for women in the South Sudanese capital, Juba.
The signing of the peace deal in 2018 in South Sudan has not only ushered in an era of renewed hope across this war-torn country, but also included a very special provision, 35% representation for women across in political decision-making. 4 years later, much remains to be done to ensure that these numbers are attained. In this regard, the Civil Affairs Division of the United Nations Mission in South Sudan organized a two-day workshop in Juba, cross-section of women leaders from Central Equatorial to not only identify specific barriers to full and equal representation, but also the role that everyone can play in breaking these down.
So our main objective is now to sensitize our women of their rights. We have also to make awareness of their health so that they know something to do with their health. We also have to make them be aware of, we have to give them knowledge of how to generate income.
For Juba City Council Mayor Michael Lado, women are key in ensuring sustainable peace in this young country. But more importantly, he feels that women should convene and connect with each other.
We are asking or appealing to all the associations to have unity among themselves, and especially women, to have unity among themselves. They consider themselves equal, and then they have social cohesion among themselves. And this is one of very important things that we need women to start that, and they continue embracing peace among themselves too.
Women and girls have been disproportionately affected by conflict in South Sudan, and their voices must be heard and included to ensure a durable peace.
Welcome back to the program. Sexual exploitation of children disrupting harm report has been launched by the South African Ministry of Social Development through the Minister Lindiwe Zulu in Sandton, South Africa. The Disrupting Harm in South Africa is part of a multi-country research project on online child sexual exploitation and abuse, OCSEA, and that's focusing on 13 countries. The research in South Africa involving children of both genders was conducted between 2020 and 2021, and it shows that 7% to 9% of internet-using children in the country had been subjected to being blackmailed to engage in sexual activities through promises of money or gifts, and their sexual images shared without their permission among others. And in most cases, children who are victims of OCSEA reported being targeted through major well-known social media providers. Minister Zulu says perpetrators of these acts are taking advantage of technology.
We are aware that child sexual abuse takes place via a variety of mediums. For instance, the University of South Africa's Youth Research Unit of the Bureau for Market Research study that is titled Among Secondary School Learners in Gauteng revealed that more than 2/3, and that is on 68.1% of the learners who participated in the study had been exposed to online pornographic material in the preceding 12 months. Such exposure was widespread and occurred among girls and boys aged between 12 and 20 years. The second key finding was on the phenomenon that is known as sexting, in which the study found that 37.9% of secondary school learners who participated in the survey shared, for a lack of better phrase, moderately indecent pictures of themselves with others. 7.6% took pictures of their genitalia, and 6.3% took naked pictures of themselves. Who do they send these to?
Together, as partners in this, we can do something. You know, we can reduce and prevent the online violence. We need to do it in a collective and whole of society response, and we want to make sure that we include children, parents, the tech companies that our colleague from the Global Partnership to End Violence told us that they are already partnering with, and of course, you know, our key and critical partners from civil society. And looking at you here in the room, we wouldn't be able to do anything without you, because you are at the community level. You are there with children, as Edith was reminding us. This is what they do day in and day out.
Survivors who were beaten and raped in Guinea's 2009 stadium massacre are hoping to finally see justice and let the world know the pain they have been carrying for 13 years as the trial of 11 suspects unfolds in the West African nation. More than 150 people were trampled, clubbed or shot dead on September 28, 2009, when a demonstration against Guinea's then military ruler, Musa Dadis Camara, was brutally repressed.
In Guinea's capital, Conakry, survivors of the 2009 stadium massacre say they have been waiting for justice for 13 years, including a woman who agreed to share her story but chose to remain anonymous. She was one of tens of thousands of protesters attending a demonstration against Guinea's then military ruler, Musa Dadis Camara. That's when security forces fired tear gas and charged the stadium.
At the beginning, nothing happened to me inside the stadium, but I got stuck as I was trying to walk outside the stadium, which is where I was assaulted and was hit in the head. I went into a toilet to hide. Then two men in all black clothes raped me inside, and they then walked out afterwards. I peeked through the door and saw a woman being helped by a man, and I took the opportunity to go out with her. When we went out, I had blood running down my face from being hit in the head. I was bleeding a lot. I found two young people who helped me out.
Many were shot, stabbed, beaten or crushed in the stampede that followed. More than 150 people were killed and several women raped. Those who survived say they have been living with the wounds, both physical and psychological. Suleiman Kamara works for Avipa, an NGO that helps victims of the massacre. He says the trial is an important milestone for survivors.
Several victims who contracted HIV have died over the years, and at a certain point, they were panicky. They all wondered whether they were going to be alive to follow this trial. Today, they are really happy to attend this trial, and some of them even fasted on the first day as they had promised to. That is how much they have been waiting for this trial.
Now, over a decade on, victims say they are hoping for justice. 11 men are currently standing trial for the massacre, including Kamara, who has previously denied responsibility. Victims say they are ready to share their stories.
We are here as victims of the 28th. I will come and tell everyone what we've been through when the time comes. Everyone will hear because this is not something people are used to. It's not something to hide. Now it is out there, and those words will be said in front of the whole world.
Earlier, Kamara's former aide-de-camp, who is also on trial, said the ex-ruler had planned and ordered the massacre. The former leader has not spoken yet, but has previously blamed the incident on errant soldiers. He is expected to testify in the coming days with his version of events.
Now let's take you down memory lane to witness the discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb in Egypt. It might interest you to know that this finding was discovered on November the 4th, 1922. Today marks 100 years the great finding was made. Take a look.
100 years ago, on November 4th, 1922, a 12-year-old Egyptian boy named Hussein tripped over a stone while fetching water for Howard Carter and his team of archaeologists at Luxor's Valley of the Kings. This misstep quickly turned into the first step that led to a discovery that has gripped the world ever since: the tomb of Tutankhamun. The boy king, who ruled during the 18th dynasty in ancient Egypt, was only 9 years old when he ascended the throne and died less than 10 years later.
2022 marks the 100th anniversary of the discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb, and also really for Tutankhamun being given back to the world, because he had become a very obscure pharaoh. So by celebrating him, we are giving his soul continued life. And also what's extraordinarily important is for Egypt, Tutankhamun is the only pharaoh who has sustained and looked after his country beyond his reign, because he has been the gift that keeps on giving. Ever since the discovery of his tomb, Tutankhamun has helped Egypt's economy and public persona and political goals a huge amount. So really, he is the one true pharaoh of Egypt who has been loyal to his country for several thousand years.
Archaeologists all over the world have described his short reign as one that brought back stability to a land that was in turmoil. He was buried in the Valley of the Kings and his tomb sealed off with the intention that no human eye should ever see the gold, jewels, and works of art his mourners had packed into the tiny chambers.
There are questions about how often Tutankhamun's tomb had been robbed in antiquity, what happened to it after the discovery, and some scholars have recently questioned the fact that maybe, or suggested, that maybe Tutankhamun's tomb has not been completely excavated, that perhaps behind the burial chamber lies a second chamber that has not been found yet, which might contain the body of another ruler, such as Nefertiti.
The king's treasures remained hidden beneath the sands for thousands of years, until they were discovered in 1922 by British Egyptologist Howard Carter and Lord Carnarvon, the 5th Earl of Carnarvon, who had spent 6 years excavating the Valley of the Kings. Tutankhamun's reign lasted barely 9 years in the vast span of ancient Egyptian history, and although his successors tried to erase the king's record from history, this valuable discovery has given the boy king an immortality his mourners never thought of.
That is indeed very much interesting, and that's how we end the program today and for the week. Thank you so much for being a part of it always. I'm Layo Olarinde. Have a lovely weekend.